My name is Scott Duffee, and today I'd like to teach a little bit more about how to do the River Jig as a form of exercise. So once again, just urge you to make sure you're in a good situation to do an exercise routine. The River Jig is a lively dance, and it's easy to really get into it really fast. And I would just encourage you to listen to your body and to pace yourself and just try to have some fun. So, River Jig double step. It's a fair bit more complicated than the resting step, but there's ways to do basic movements to work your way up to it. Start with that feeling of shifting your weight from side to side. That's the first movement that you want to be really comfortable with. After you start to feel really comfortable with that movement and you feel a little bit more connected to the music as you shift your weight, give a little bend to the knee. The next movement you want to add is a lifting of your heel. And we'll call that a bounce. It's not a bounce right off the ground, but it's just kind of a bounce. And we'll do that twice every time we shift our weight. Shift, bounce, bounce, 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 shift. And you might notice there's a pause in there as well. Bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce. And when we're doing the bounce, we're just lifting the heel of the leg that's carrying most of our weight. So we've shifted the weight. All of our weight is on one leg. The other leg's just kind of dangling there for now. And we give the double bounce. We shift again, give the double bounce. Shift, pause, bounce, bounce. So we'll work our way up to half-time speed. Bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce, shift, pause, shift, pause, bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce. So I would encourage you to get used to that basic movement where you're shifting your weight, giving a little pause, and then giving a double bounce. And as you do that movement, you can work your way up closer to the speed of the music. As you do that, you might be a little bit off time at first, but just try to have fun. It's okay if it feels awkward at first. Just try to work your way up to it. Challenge yourself just as much as you feel comfortable. Those bounces are going to get really fast as you work your way up to full speed. Bounce, bounce. That's about how fast they'll be. Bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce, shift, pause, bounce, bounce. Very fast little bounces when you're going full speed. So we'll do this movement going in a forward motion. Alright, so we'll slow that down again. And remember the basic movements are shift, give a little pause, and then a couple quick bounces. Shift, pause, bounce, bounce. Shift, pause, bounce, bounce. And as you speed up, those two little bounces are quite fast after one after the other. So you may want to practice just by doing a basic heel lifting bounce from side to side. Only challenge yourself as much as it feels comfortable for your body. Do a few quick bounces from side to side, and then we'll try to connect with the music again. Shift, pause, bounce, bounce. Shift, pause, bounce, bounce. And we'll work our way up to full speed. Pause, bounce, bounce. Shift, pause, bounce, bounce. And in a circle. So we'll review that movement without the music briefly here. Remember, it was a shift, pause, bounce, bounce. Shift, pause, bounce, bounce. Shift, pause, bounce, 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 bounce. And as we sped up, start to look more like this. Shift, pause, bounce, bounce. Shift, pause, bounce, bounce. And you speed up some more. And those bounces are very fast. Now when you're doing the bounce, if you feel so inclined and if your joints are feeling healthy and strong, you can turn that bounce into 2 actual hops instead of just a bounce. So you can go shift, hop, hop, shift, where your whole foot comes off the ground just a little bit. And full speed would be about like this. And I like to do that in a circle going forward. And now I'm going to try this movement in a backwards circle. Again, this is the beginning of the double jig step. And as I'm getting more comfortable with this basic step, I'm going to try to throw in a snap kick or a scuff kick. All right. For this session, I want to start with a few tips that have really helped me to enjoy the Red River Jig as a form of exercise. And it's just a way to connect with a tradition that is also great for health. So the first tip, as I had mentioned in the previous video, I like to dance in moccasins because they have the leather on the bottom, and they give that little bit of a slide when you do the kick that's often done with the Red River Jig. It's kind of a scuff kick, so your foot kind of scuffs the ground. So that's my first tip, is to wear moccasins or shoes with a bottom that is not overly grippy. Of course, you need some level of grip so you don't slip and hurt yourself, but you also need some level of ability for it to give a little scuff and a little slide. Rubber bottom shoes are hard to jig with, I find. So that's my first suggestion, is using moccasins. And I like to put a thick sole in my moccasins, and that makes jigging a lot easier on my joints, feels a lot more comfortable, and I enjoy it more because of that. So that's my first tip, is moccasins with thick soles in them. So tip number 2. I like to jig at home just wearing some earphones and having a version or a few versions of the Red River Jig playing on my earphones. And it just makes it so that it's not a disturbance to anyone else. And it's just an easy way to exercise without bothering anyone else, and you still have plenty of fun, just that the music is in your earphones rather than playing on a speaker. And a third tip I'd like to add to that is sometimes I have jigged in the basement of a house because it's more private, quiet space. Fortunately, most basements have a cement floor. So what I've done is I've found a 4 foot by 4 foot patch of carpet, and I put a 4 foot by 4 foot piece of thin plywood on there, and that makes an excellent dancing surface. Just 4 feet by 4 feet carpet and plywood on top of that. So that's tip number 3. Tip number 4 is to remember the 2 different parts of the Red River Jig. Give a little demonstration here. You have the high part and the low part. The high part, I like to dance that in a circle. That's the tradition that I enjoy. There are different traditions to the Red River Jig. That's one tradition that I enjoy. If that helps, I encourage you to feel free to practice that tradition. And then in the low part is when you stop and you do a fancy step. So the low part again sounds like this. So that's the low part, and then of course the high part playing right now. High part's in a circle, low part stand on the spot to do a fancy step. That's just one tradition of the Red River Jig. That's more specifically the Métis tradition. But as I said in a previous video, various cultures, nations enjoy the Red River Jig. Dance according to the culture and tradition that you feel most comfortable in, connected to, however you see fit. So that brings me to my 5th suggestion, which is browse the internet to look at Red River Jig videos, and you'll see different versions of them. You'll see performance style Red River Jig. We can't all be performers, but they're fun to watch and they can help you feel motivated. The nice thing about seeing different versions of the Red River Jig is sometimes you'll find traditions and versions that you feel more connected to, and you can think about that as you dance. So that's a way to help stay motivated with this form of exercise, which is also a form of culture and a form of art, all at the same time. Now, one last suggestion I would like to make before I demonstrate a warm-up routine is that you do a warm-up routine. I like to have a version of the Red River Jig playing that's a few minutes long, and you can do 2 or 3 versions in a row. It usually goes by the number of changes or fancy steps in each version. So I like to do, a few minutes, 7 minutes of a warm-up, maybe 10 minutes of a warm-up. And when you're doing the warm-up, try to connect with how you're feeling in your body. Just get the body warmed up, get the joints feeling more limber, loosen up, try to release some of the tensions you might notice in your body. You can do that to the Red River Jig. You can also do that to other forms of music that you enjoy. So that's my last suggestion before demonstrating a warm-up routine is just do a warm-up in a way that you feel most comfortable. Just enjoy it, just for fun. And then your second round, do a second round of specifically Red River Jig, where you kind of try to work on the steps a bit while also getting good exercise. if you feel you're in a good situation to challenge yourself, challenge yourself. If you're feeling a little off, but you just still want some movement, just work at the pace that is safe and healthy and positive for yourself. Okay. So I like to start by just hearing the music, moving my body to the music, shifting the weight from side to side, a little bend in the knee, whatever feels most comfortable. As the music continues to play, I like to connect to the rhythm of the music. That's the next step I like to take. Try to see where I might feel tense in my body, and I try to loosen that up a bit. If I veer off from the rhythm of the music, that's okay. I'll find my way back to the rhythm. And there it is, connecting to the rhythm once again. So, the next thing I like to do in the warm-up is to practice the scuff kick. So I practice how that feels to scuff my foot on the ground in a little snap kick. Try to keep my limbs flexible as I do that. And then I like to do the scuff kick walk as part of my warm-up routine. Do this walk for a while until I feel I'm connecting to the music. Keeping time with the music. And on the high part, I like to do the scuff kick walk in a circle. Same spot for the low part of the tune. Now for the next circle, I'm going to go in a backwards direction. Remember, when you're going backwards, be careful not to trip on anything. So that is the scuff kick part of my warm-up routine. Okay, so now we'll get ready to do the next part of the warm-up routine that I enjoy doing, and that's just the main resting step. Shift, 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 pause, shift, 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 pause, and I'll do that slowly at first, and then eventually I'll catch up to the rhythm of the music. And I like to do this basic step, which is the resting step, in a circle on the high part, on the spot in the low part. So this next round, I'm going to add the kick to the resting step, and in the high part, I'm going to go in the backwards direction. Again, be careful when you're jigging backwards. And the low part in the same spot. So the next thing I'd like to do is a basic resting step in a circle on the high part. And on the low part, I'll do a very basic fancy step. Do that very slowly at first. What you do on one side, I encourage you to do the same thing on the other side as well. So that time I did it slowly. But this time I'm going to do the same fancy step, and I'm going to try to connect to the rhythm of the music. There we go. And switch to the other side. All right. Music's getting a little livelier. I'm going to do the resting step in a circle. And do that basic fancy step. Okay, so I'm going to loosen up a bit, and now I'm going to go into some common movements for the Red River Jig double jig step. So that movement again starts with shifting your weight, giving a couple hops every time you shift your weight. Hop, hop, shift, pause, hop, hop, shift, pause, hop, hop. So I'll do that slowly until I feel comfortable to catch up to the rhythm of the music. And by hop, I just do a little lift of the heel, just a very mild hop. And I like to do that in a circle going forward. And now I'm going to try this movement in a backwards circle. Again, this is the beginning of the double jig step. And as I'm getting more comfortable with this basic step, I'm going to try to throw in a snap kick or a scuff kick. Alright, so now that the music is done, I like to continue some movement for about a minute or so. Keep the legs loose. Move my body a little bit while my heart rate slows down. And again, I'm trying to feel any tensions in my body and just loosen them up. And this is how I prepare for the second part of what I like to do when I practice the Red River Jig. So the first part was a warm-up, and the second part I just basically play the same version of the fiddle tune that I like, and that's when I practice my steps. So there you have it. That's one way to do a good exercise warm-up session with the Red River Jig.